I feel like I was on this stage 20 minutes ago.
Already?
For the Tom Lake.
Oh yeah, no, goes that fast.
The Our Town Lollapalooza.
Yes.
And had a really good time. But hi, Amor, thank you for doing this, pal.
And it's my pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Symphony Space. It's great to have you here to celebrate the first day of Anne's new work, Whistler, this wonderful novel. Thank you for coming. So I'm gonna go right to I have a question I want to get right off the bat.
Okay, good. Okay.
So some time ago, you wrote, "So many of the great writers we studied in school were unknown in their lifetimes, or better still, scorned and dismissed. So as a young writer, I naturally assumed this to be the preferable scenario." So my question for you is, does it bother you to have become so successful and beloved? Because you kind of blew it, right? I mean, in terms of the plan.
You know, low expectations are the secret to happiness. And when I was a kid, my goal was to make my living as a writer. And I thought that could mean anything. I could write magazine pieces, newspaper pieces. I could do anything, ad copy. If I could make my living as a writer, that's all I wanted. And my idea of a living was an efficiency apartment and maybe health insurance. And I'm not joking. Like, I never dreamed of owning a house or having a family or going anywhere. I just dreamed of making a living as a writer. So I did have that Kafkaesque La Boheme idea of what my life was going to be like. I never pictured this. And also, this is lovely, but this is gravy. I get to write, and I do the thing that I want to do. And if I couldn't do it, if something happened tomorrow and I couldn't do it anymore, I would still have a great and happy life. But the rest of it is just something else.
Terrific.
Yeah.
So to give you a sense of the evening, what we're going to do is I'm going to have Anne talk a little bit about the origins of the book, sort of to open up the conversation. Before we then dig in, the wonderful Becky Ann Baker is going to join us on stage and read from the opening of the work. And then Anne and I will, thank you. Yeah. And then Anne and I will.
I was so excited that it was Becky Ann Baker. I'm just thrilled.
Anne and I will have a chance to talk at some length, and at the very end we'll have some time for questions. And if we don't get to your questions, we'll give you Anne's cell phone number at the end of the call.
Hey, Amor, do you know why that joke falls flat?
Because she doesn't have a cell phone.
That's right.
That's why I'm safe.
So we'll be giving them yours.
I will give you her telex address, which is the only way she communicates now. So let's start. Just as sort of to welcome us all into the world of the book. Can you talk a little bit about the origin of this particular work? Like, where did it come from? What got you going in it? What was the starting point for you?
I don't know if I've told you this or not. Have I?
Yeah.
Okay. So I had been working on a book for about a year and thinking about that book for a lot longer than that. And in that novel, for those of you that read Tom Lake, Laura had, oh, stop it. You know what? We're going to be here all night if we keep doing that. Laura had 3 daughters, and the youngest daughter was Nell. And in this book, Nell moved to Bushwick with a bad boyfriend to become an actress. And she gets a job in a cupcake shop in Williamsburg. And life isn't going well. It's really hard. And she meets a very strange, compelling woman in Central Park. And I just kept writing it, and nothing was happening, and it wasn't going anywhere. And my husband really wanted to go to Europe and have a vacation. And I'm just going to do this as fast as I can. And I said, I don't want to go to Europe. I don't want to take a vacation. I want to figure out what's going on with this book. Take your sister. And so they did. Carl and Nancy went to Paris and Amsterdam, and they were going to be gone for 10 days. And I was going to figure out what was wrong with this book. And the second day they were gone, I read through the 100 and something pages that I had, and I discovered what was wrong with this book, which was it was not going to work. And it was not ever going to work. And I threw it away, but I had 8 days home alone, and I didn't have to make dinner, and you don't ever want to waste 8 days home alone. So I always have in the back of my head some essays that I want to write. And I had a long essay that I wanted to write called Glowworms, which was in the New Yorker, and not before I wrote it, actually after. And so I wrote that essay in my remaining 8 days, and in that essay, Glowworms, there was a moment about my friend Jim Fox. And Jim Fox died 2 years ago on his 85th birthday, one of the profound friendships and loves in my life. And I realized that I could write Jim's voice. And it felt like holding a golden thread. And I thought, I want to write a book that is not about Jim and is not about me, but takes all of the love that Jim had for me and all of the love that I had for Jim, and I will put it in a made-up story. People keep saying to me, oh, this is your most autobiographical novel. I was doing an interview with somebody the other day, and the guy said to me, this is your most autobiographical novel. I said, but you don't know me. Like, why would you say that? And he said, it just feels so personal. It feels so true. And what feels personal and true in this book is the love, and the love is personal and true. And again, it was that thing of holding a golden thread, and just, I could get it so clearly. So my line is, I went to divorce court and married the bailiff, because I gave up this novel, and then I just immediately started writing this completely different novel.
And it was quick, as I remember. I mean, in terms of the amount of time relative to your work
quick.
in the past.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Although Liz Gilbert said to me, and this is very meaningful, she said, runway is runway. And so even if you spend all this time working on a book that comes to nothing, it's like you're a hamster and you're getting the wheel going faster and faster and faster. And that is the point at which I started this book. The hamster wheel was spinning at 90 miles an hour.
So, before we go on, I want to welcome up Becky Ann Baker to the stage, please.
Yes, please.
To read from the opening of the book. Oh, here we are.
Old guy, my husband said in a low voice, his lips touching my ear, near the exit sign. Stop it. The joke itself was as old as rocks. Jonathan raised his eyebrows. I'm serious. He kept looking at you in the ticket line. Then he followed us through medieval art, and now he's just standing there. Do you see him? He looks at you whenever you're not looking. Everyone cuts through medieval, I said. It doesn't constitute stalking. We were in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York City, New York. I didn't say stalking. It wasn't crowded by the standards of the Met, no blockbuster Van Gogh exhibit or Costume Institute to gum things up. If you took the time to notice the people around you, chances were you'd see some of them again in a different wing. That guy? I asked, tipping my head slightly in the direction of a tall, thin man who looked like a French film star, black jeans, loose black curls. My husband straightened up. Could you take me seriously for 1 minute? Why did the French guy imply a lack of seriousness? I didn't ask. Jonathan was leaving tomorrow for what might be a long trip, and I had just posted grades for the end of the school year. We decided to make use of the city, have a nice day. I'm taking you seriously. Okay, let's go up a floor and see what happens. We just got here. I liked the American wing, the Tiffany glass and baseball cards, that tragic bust of Lincoln. We'll come right back. He started walking in the direction of armor again, that dimly lit hall of school children staring at swords and shields. A shiver of gladness passed through me because they were not my school children and it was not my field trip. A suit of armor could weigh more than 60 pounds, the teacher said as we passed, reading her facts off a display card, though the children were plenty old enough to read. The boys would all be picturing themselves going into battle with a mace, and the girls would be thinking about the burdened horses that had to carry both the men and their armor. Still with us? I asked Jonathan. He looked without looking. Either he was making the whole thing up or he would have been a brilliant spy. Yes. We picked up speed in medieval art. Jonathan hates how fast I walk and will often stop to let me sail on past without noticing he's no longer with me. But in medieval art, he set the pace. I guess the old guy hung in there because when we got to the grand staircase, Jonathan asked me if I'd taken a jealous lover. Funny, I said, and up we went. If he follows us to modern and contemporary, we'll know. What will we know? I set my stair-climbing pace to his, mindful of his knee. That he's in love with you, Jonathan said generously. That old guys can't get enough of you. It was not the first time I'd regretted having told him this. Now, in my defense, I only said it once, and that was decades ago, never thinking that one day we'd be married and he would hold on to the information like a souvenir postcard from another era. My husband had taken me as his date to a hospital board dinner more than 20 years ago, when the head of general surgery all but climbed across the table to sit beside me. He then proceeded to tell me his every thought about the emergency appendectomy he had performed before arriving, about what the food on our plates was doing to our livers, about starlight. When finally the evening was over, Jonathan apologized in the valet line. I have no idea what that was about, he said. I knew what it was about, but it was stupid of me to say it to Jonathan. Old guys love me. No, they had always loved me. I never experienced a flicker of interest from a man my own age, but show me a man 10 or 15 years older, 20 years older, and he'd be pulling me aside to tell me he couldn't remember the last time he felt this way. I meant to be funny, but Jonathan received my explanation as permission. There in the valet line, he took me in his arms and kissed me as his car was pulling up, the headlights dousing us in white light. He was 47 to my 30 then, as he was 70 to my 53 now. At the top of the museum's marble stairs, we took a left, bypassing drawings and prints, and heading straight to modern and contemporary. Now, for this, I gave my husband credit. People don't come to the second floor and skip drawings and prints unless they have an agenda. I, for one, never went to modern and contemporary at the Met because there were other places in this city to go if modern and contemporary was what I was after. But there it was, a monumental slab of granite into which 2 horses had been chiseled. Or maybe it wasn't 2 horses so much as it was 1 horse and its ghost. It was the only piece in the room, affixed to the wall across from a bank of windows overlooking Central Park. We had come so far from those flat-faced angels and their gilded halos, proffered lilies, and velvet gowns. Who is this? I asked my husband. There he is, Jonathan said. And for a second, I thought he meant the artist. Not the artist, but an old man, visibly winded from the significant distance he had traveled. He walked into the room where we were, and then seeing him, immediately walked away. Oh, I said to Jonathan. Yes, he said. I went to the wall knowing better than to put my hands on art and wanting to do exactly that. 2 horses, Charles Ray, Chicago-born, 1953. Do you know who he is? My husband asked. He still wasn't talking about art. I shook my head. What do you want to do? Do? I asked. Are you seeing this? You can't tell me you aren't interested. I wasn't interested in a stranger's attention, nor was I troubled by it. Men rarely understood this. How do you know he isn't looking at you? I asked. Did you think about that? Maybe you went to school together. But wait, I didn't mean that. It sounded unkind. The man was clearly older than Jonathan. The old man was older than my old man. It isn't me, my husband said. Okay then, it's me. We're not going to invite him for dinner. You don't have any curiosity? I had plenty of curiosity, but I wasn't curious about this. My dear dead father, whom I had not seen nearly enough of in his life, gave me one piece of advice that I have found endlessly useful. If you don't want to engage with someone, don't engage. By which he meant don't smack the side of the car that cuts you off at the crosswalk because the person in the car might have a gun. Don't think you get to say your piece and then walk away. That's what I was thinking when Jonathan left to follow the man who had followed me there. Not that Jonathan was angry, it wasn't that at all. He meant to start a conversation with a stranger. I wanted to think about nothing but those horses, but the distraction of my absent husband proved powerful. Jonathan was gone, and then he was still gone. When I became annoyed, I went to find him. There they were, the two of them, tucked in a corner of the next gallery. Jonathan was talking, and the man who wore a navy blazer and pink-collared shirt, gray slacks, looked up at him, nodding. His hair was thick and straight and very white, and his glasses were tortoise and round, topped by a noticeable pair of eyebrows. When he saw me crossing the room, he touched my husband's arm, and my husband turned and smiled at me, a smile that said, "You're never going to believe this." "You're never going to believe this," he said. "Okay," I said, and then I said hello to the man. He nodded at me as if he wanted to speak and could not speak. His obvious mortification made me feel tenderly towards him. I know, I wanted to say to this stranger in regard to my husband. He does this sometimes. "This is your stepfather," Jonathan said. I looked at the man and then at Jonathan, and of course it was not my stepfather. Lucas Ecker lived outside of Boston in a large house with my mother. "Keep going back, one more stepfather," Jonathan said, watching me work. "I'm sorry," Eddie Triplett said. All of this transpired quietly. No one turned to watch life's drama unpacked in the gallery, but still I made a sound. I put my hand to my mouth to stop it, but it had already gotten away from me. It was his voice, Eddie Triplett's voice, coming out of this old man's mouth. "Eddie."
Becky Ann Baker, everyone. Thank you.
Can I say something? Can I say something that was so beautiful? I liked it so much more when you did it. And I recorded the audiobook, and I really wish you had recorded the audiobook. Man, that was a really moving experience to hear that. That was, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. There's it. More love. So, my next question, and this is true. This book seems to be your most autobiographical book. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, so bear with me for a second.
Okay, I'm listening.
So, some years ago, you wrote, "I used to take a great deal of pride in the fact that people who read my novels, even all of my novels, wouldn't really know anything more about me or my life at the end of them than they had known when they started." Okay, so that was sort of a vision of the early oeuvre of Ann Patchett. Now, eventually, you come to Commonwealth. And you were very open about saying, this is a new thing for me, even though this book is not about my family exactly. It's not about the experiences of my family. It is absolutely a celebration of them, a representation of them. Which is true.
As my mother said, none of it happened and all of it's true.
And all of it's true, okay. And it was a case where it was enough of an overlap that you went to your siblings and said, listen, I'm going to do this, and I don't want to do it unless you're comfortable with it, and et cetera, and got their support. So this does, to me, feel like it's at least a continuation of that trend, or maybe even a step further, because, and I understand the fact that these events are not the events of your life, but the tone of the narrator, and particularly her relationship to her husband, Jonathan, is very evocative to me of your relationship with Carl. Not to put you in a corner, but the character is as gentlemanly, as kind, as, he's a similar profile in terms of age and profession and everything else. So I really wanted it, in reading it, I was like, God, this must have been great fun. That was my instinct, is to have said, okay, I am going to allow some of this to come out on the page, even from a place that is coming right out of my household to some degree into the story. But so maybe that's completely wrong.
No, it's not. You know what I did with this book is at every turn I decided to make things easy. I decided to pick the path of least resistance. Am I going to have a character, the husband? Okay, he's going to be older. My husband is older. He's not a doctor. He's a hospital administrator. Really? What difference does it make? Because what I wanted to do, again, I wanted to hold on to that golden thread. I wanted to just focus so much on getting that feeling of love onto the page that my favorite thing is when I was trying to figuring out jobs is always a big deal for me. What do these characters do? And so I thought, Daphne is going to be a science writer for the New York Times. And so I have written for the Times over the years, and I tracked down who's the head of the Science Times. Will you talk to me on the phone? Yes, I will. And the guy called me, and I was like, okay, I'm going to have a character who is the writing for the Science Times. Can you tell me something about what the staff writers at the Science Times, what they do? And he said, well, they all have PhDs, and most of them have a degree in public health. Some of them worked in molecular biology. Others did work in Tanzania for several years. And he's going on, and I'm listening to him talk. I only asked him one question. And I'm listening to him talk, and I'm thinking, or she could be an English teacher. That's just not the story. I'm not going to expend a ton of energy. And so great, I was an English teacher, she's an English teacher, I know how to do that. The part, which is the beginning of the novel that Becky just read, there's a line in which she says, my father's great piece of advice is if you don't want to engage with somebody, don't engage. That was my father's great piece of advice that I live by every day of my life. Now, that character's not my father, but I just thought, I'm not going to expend my energy coming up with a fictional piece of advice from a fictional father. I'm just going to take the piece of advice, I'm going to take the husband and the job and the fictional father, and I'm going to use what I have. It's still not autobiographical, but what makes something autobiographical is the stuff that you wouldn't guess. That you wouldn't say, I bet that the reason that this book is autobiographical is because it captures the love that Anne had with her friend Jim. And that's what makes it autobiographical.
Terrific. But so the next step is not a Carl of Knausgaard. You're not going to do an auto fiction next. 500-page book about your life. No.
How boring
No,
would
no.
that, well, how boring was it for him? How boring would it be for me?
But so in describing that decision, that okay, I'm gonna lean into the choice, the least path of least resistance
Yes.
choice. How did that affect the writing and the experience of writing the book?
It was great.
Yeah, okay.
It was just great. And I really am so glad that this is a habit I picked up in my 60s, because if I had picked it up in my 20s, I probably would be spent by now.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking, well, in the time that I have left to write novels, why not just use up what I've got? It clears the path. I mean, I just realize how much time, and I think back to State of Wonder, and how much time I spent with a machete cutting my way through the Amazon trying to write that book. It was an enormous amount of energy spent, and who knows, maybe well spent, writing something that was so insanely far afield from my life. And that's great. That's a great way to write, but it's also great to do it the other way.
So this is a slightly related question, but not really. And if I think about some of your novels from the last decade or whatever, if I think of Commonwealth or The Dutch House, Whistler here, one thing that they have in common is they are very much about family, and that there's a real examination of all the geometry of family. What does it mean to be a sibling? What does it mean to be a daughter of a biological parent? What does it mean to be a stepchild? And that's investigated in all three of those books. What does it mean to be a step-sibling? And so I was interested in asking about that. Like, what brings you back to that topic, or as a part of the narrative? And how do you feel about that thematically in terms of the work of Whistler?
I feel like there are things that we all come back to, even if we're trying really hard not to. And I know writers who have written one or two really beautiful books, and then they say, by God, I am not going back to the center of my heart. I am going to make sure that I don't go into a rut. And it almost always fails. And sometimes I think, you've got a deck of cards and you can shuffle and shuffle, but that's still your deck. And I keep coming back to family. I don't necessarily mean to come back to family. I try to do other things, but even books that you would say, State of Wonder, Bel Canto, that are farther afield, they're still the exact same book. It's still about family. It's maybe not the people that you're related to. When I lie in bed at night, which is when I'm always thinking about the novels that I want to write, it comes back to those things. And Elizabeth Strout has been so important to me. Yeah, right? Just as a role model of, like, write whatever the hell you want to write. Go back to your heart and tell that story as truthfully and fully as you can, and don't think, well, I mean, maybe people are tired of Lucy Barton. We're not. And they're re-releasing all of Philip Roth's novels with the covers that all look good together. And as a bookseller and as somebody who has these videos about, New to You and Backlist, they're releasing them 3 at a time and they're sending them to me. And I have read 90% of them, and they were hugely important to me. And even the very worst Roth novels, and there were some bad ones, are still books that were better than anything else. And what was so interesting, opening up the front cover, the way the backlist is structured is, these are the Zuckerman novels, and these are the Roth novels. Like 4 categories: Updike, Rabbit, and Updike with other characters back. He just wrote the same things over and over again. There is a long and noble literary history of going back and writing the same things over and over again. And I'm not gonna worry about it.
That's right. It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
So this question has sort of a part B to it, because one of, while Dutch House, Commonwealth, Whistler are look into the architecture of family quite...
And Tom Lake.
And Tom Lake does too. The one thing that, at least these three, and I can't remember how Tom fits this because I hadn't thought about it, but for these three, one thing that is a commonality is they all are looking back, the main characters are looking back at an event or sort of a moment in the past, well in the past, decades in the past, and reinvestigating it and kind of bringing it back to the surface and reconsidering, what does that mean? How did that thing that happened back then affect who I am today? How did it affect the way that I perceive the other members of my family? How did it get us where we are? And this is happening in Whistler. As we saw from the introduction, you all now know that the opening is meeting this stepfather who she obviously hasn't seen in enough time that she could even recognize him visually at the moment, right? And that begins this process of bringing to the surface some moments from the past which are fantastic and the reverberations in this fascinating way. So I wanted to ask you about this again, thematically across these books, this notion of this moment in the past that can have a big effect on an individual or a family, and the process of doing the archaeology around that. Can you talk about that, like how you think about that thematically, or why that interests you, or if that's in fact a way of thinking about part of this book?
I've never been in therapy.
This is great. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And
I'm $500 an hour, and I take PayPal or whatever.
But I actually, when I'm listening to this question, that is what I am thinking. I've never been in therapy. I don't think that fiction is necessarily where we go to work out our past and our problem, but gosh, it starts to look that way when you ask that question. That I do go back to try and figure out the past, and what's so strange about that is, and maybe this is a therapeutic moment, I feel myself very much to be someone who lives in the present moment. And when my husband and I are having dinner, he will often say something like, 8th grade, who was your best friend in 8th grade? And I'm like, what? Why are we talking about 8th grade? Or he'll say, when you came home, did your parents play music? And I'm like, who thinks about these things? And also he will say, who do you think is going to win the election? I don't know who's going to win the election. He conversationally, it's the past and the future.
Fluid.
And both of those things are completely mysterious to me. I think I'm here, I'm right here. And yet in fiction, I do find myself having characters who are going back. And a lot of times they don't mean to. Something is happening to them. Even in Tom Lake, it's about Peter Duke resurfacing and the daughters wanting to know about the past that is pulling Laura's character back into the past. But I am very attracted to books that happen in the present, by which I don't mean like present tense, but in one timeline. And I am often trying to do that. And then I find myself putting a frame around it.
That's since you're bringing that up, that raises a technical question that I had, which is that you've said in the past that one of the things you'll do is you'll write the work in the order in which it's going to be read, in essence.
Absolutely.
So for those you get the picture, is that you as a writer you could say, I'm going to write the last chapter first and then go back to the beginning, or you could move things around or whatever. But Anne's argument, I'm paraphrasing you, is that if in doing that you're in writing out of order, you run the peril of creating a scene later which is in a way misinformed, because
Yes.
it is not actually the build-up to all of the events, but also the language, the emotions, the motifs that have been laid out before. And so you kind of do that at your peril. So Anne, you've said you write in a straight line through.
Right.
Well, structurally, part of the joy of this book is, as we've said, here we're in the present in New York. We've run into this old stepfather from decades past. It launches an investigation, some memories of that time that are quite powerful. And so the book does go back and forth a little bit structurally, and it actually leaves the moment, the present, to go back and look more closely at what happened at a particular day, let's say. And so my question for you was, did you adhere to the rule this time? Because I could have imagined wanting to nail that, make sure that you had a concrete sense of that event in the past before you started laying out the investigation of it in the future. Or did you actually, sort of move just like the narrative does, going back and forward and back and forward?
I wrote it exactly the way you read it.
Okay, yeah.
And straight through. Two interesting things. One, a couple of weeks ago, Virginia Evans came to Parnassus, and we talked about The Correspondent, which was really fun because, of course, every single person in the room had already read it. And I asked her that question. All of these letters, did you write them out of order? Did you write a whole group of letters between two people and then shuffle them in a way? And she was like, no, I wrote the book exactly the way you read it. Same with Andrew Sean Greer's Less, which is a book that I love, and it's completely episodic, and he goes from country to country, and the pieces don't necessarily build or inform one another. They're just kind of perfect jewels, every single one. And I said, did you write this in order and then shuffle them around? He was like, no, I wrote it exactly the way you read it. I am very quick to say there is no right way to do the job, and it makes perfect sense to me that people would write things out of order and move them around. But here is an interesting point. So I believe it is no spoiler whatsoever to say that Eddie and Daphne were in a car accident when Daphne was 9. And so the pieces from the past that are dropped in throughout the novel have to do with this car accident. I did the audiobook. My friend Suzanne Mitchell, who is the audio director at HarperCollins, came to Nashville, and it was Suzanne's idea that I record it because I have recorded my nonfiction but not the fiction. And she said when she called me, I read this book and it's so autobiographical. I could just hear your voice. I can't imagine anybody reading it except you or Becky Ann Baker, who obviously should have done it. But when she got to my house the first night, and her plane was really delayed because of weather, and she didn't end up getting to my house until about midnight, and she said, I have this idea. And it was a Saturday night, and I had called the studio, and they're friends of mine, and I said, can we come in and record on Sunday? And they said, yes. This all had to do with a terrible storm that was coming into New York, and she wasn't going to be able to get out unless she left right away. And she said, I had this idea. I want you to record all of the pieces in the past on the first day together, because your voice is going to be lighter. It is in a different voice. It's in a child's voice, and I think it would be better to do it that way and then go back to the beginning on the second day. And I said, oh, that sounds like a great idea. We'll do it that way. And when I did that, I thought, a smarter writer would have read those pieces together. Like, even if I didn't write them together.
To make sure they scanned.
To make sure that they flow perfectly. But I don't have to be a smarter writer because they were perfect. It was like joists. It was woodworking. They fit exactly right. And to read them through in one take was kind of astonishing.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Well done, me.
Yes, well done. All right, so another sort of aspect of the book that I think it's worth talking about, investigating, is that we've mentioned the car accident, so now that you've mentioned it, I
Yeah.
don't feel bad about mentioning
Yeah.
it. One of the things that happens, because they're kind of trapped in the car for a period of time, you have a young girl and the stepfather, is that he tells a story.
Yeah.
And which is a central part of the book overall. And later, this notion of storytelling keeps coming up. So her biological father, a fisherman, sort of talks to them about what life at sea is like. And it turns out to be not a complete fiction to comfort them, but it's the story that he tells that, that the family kind of lives by. And later in the novel, and I'm not giving anything away with this, that the part of this investigation of the past leads our main character into a conversation with her sister, where there's a question about what did we go through as children, and they don't see eye to eye on that. And there's sort of the revelation, or that, and of course this makes sense for any of us. They each have their own version of the story of their childhood, which has affected them differently. So I was sort of interested in this running theme, this motif. Is the story within the novel, the stories within our lives. Is how do you think about that when you're thinking about your characters, you're thinking about the people you know? How do you think about the role that storytelling plays in in who they are and who we are?
Well, we all tell stories, and we tell different versions of stories depending on who we're telling it to. And as time goes on, we don't go back to the event. We go back to the last time we told the story. And that over time, stories get very shaped. I was in New York on September 11th, and I was with a friend of mine, and we were downtown in Stuyvesant Park, and we were there when the first tower fell, and we went back to her apartment at top speed, went up to the 5th floor, went on to her landscape, saw the second tower fall. And years later, I would say every single minute of that day is burned into my memory with utter clarity. And maybe 10 years after the fact, she and I sat down and talked about that day. And oh my God, we were not together.
Yeah, right.
And we were holding hands all day. We were physically joined, running top speed. We were together, and both of us would swear in front of a court of law that our version of that day was the true version of that day. And so that just kind of really made me think about memory, and that there is no such thing as a true story. There's no such thing as an accurate account. And it is if you can get to that place, then the next step is that your story is true, not because it happened, but because that is how you remembered it. And you have shaped it into a story, and you have told it so many times, and it becomes true. I actually really feel like that's what happens with our president.
Oh, right.
That
Okay.
I mean that in such a serious way. I don't mean that as a joke.
Yeah.
I really believe that he tells the story and tells the story, and people tell the story back to him, and he believes the story, and he
Creates reality.
believes it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that we all do some version of that. And that is where fiction exists. It's fiction, right? Even if you say, oh, well, that's autobiographical, meaning, AKA, it's true, it's fiction. It's all fiction, friends. It's all fiction.
One thing that I feel like that you show in this story is that in a world where our past is a story we tell ourselves and that we are shaped by it, that a sort of a hidden, sort of a glass half full aspect of that is that there may be an aspect of who we think of ourselves that we're not happy with. And there's a possibility of redemption by revisiting the story that we've told ourselves, which may not be an accurate version of events, but has affected how we treat ourselves. Does that make sense? Back into the therapy room here.
Yeah.
Because she, I think, takes what her sister has to say, and there is sort of she does have to kind of rethink 30 years of assumption that has been affected her, the way she lives her life, not necessarily to the better at all times. Is that fair?
That's a really interesting point, and maybe too oblique because we're not telling you things.
Sorry about that.
But there is a moment towards the end where there's a group of people sitting around a table, and it's like, oh, I never knew, or I thought it was this way, or I thought it was this way. And it is the reckoning of story. Here's a weird fact that I just love, and maybe there's somebody in this room that can shout out and say, yes, I know what you're talking about, because I don't. But somewhere, once, I heard, I think, on the radio, I would almost swear it was something I heard on the radio, which must be NPR because that's where my radio is, that the happiest memories of childhood, someone did a study and they interviewed all these people about the happiest memory of childhood, and that there were 3 factors that were in common. I mean, not all the time, but like the top 3 hits of all these gathered stories. An element of danger, the presence of the father, fried food. And in the back of my mind, I thought, I want to write a story in which there is the element of danger, the presence of the father, and fried food. So when you see those chicken tenders showing up in Whistler, now you're going to know why they're there.
Excellent. Yeah, very good.
But I long to find where I heard that. I mean, maybe it was in a dream, who knows?
Yeah, I don't have an answer for you, but I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
And also,
Well, everybody in this room is going to Google that later tonight. You know that's what's going to happen.
and do you know that because I live, among the emotionally Amish or something, it never occurred to me to Google it.
You can find it. You can find it.
This is why I am a novelist, though. And people are always like, are you worried that AI is coming for your job? And I'm like, what?
Okay. Can we talk about New York for a second? So as was revealed again in the reading, this book opens at the Met Museum, which is, so for you New Yorkers, you have an added treat that you get to live with Ann Patchett through New York City in this story. Just for the hometown audience,
Right, right.
What can you talk about your relationship to New York? Because you haven't written.
I've never lived here.
Yeah. Okay. And you haven't
And I'm
written.
here all the time.
And you haven't written about it enormously, right?
No.
So what was that like? What's your relationship to New York?
Okay, so it's not about New York, it's about transportation. Because this book is a lot about transportation.
Trains, cars,
It's trains and cars and making the train and the boat and like where you can get to, the bus, being in Boston and your boyfriend moves to New York, but actually to Bronxville, and are you going to take the train? You don't have enough money for the train, you're going to take the bus, which really was the theme of my 20s. I had a boyfriend in New York, I was living on the Cape, I was living in Cambridge, I didn't have enough money for the train. Again, autobiography. These are the things that I'm like, I love these details. I can really talk about taking the bus. And so what I wanted was, I wanted New York, but I also wanted Bronxville. They've got to commute in and out of the city. I wanted Boston, but not exactly Boston, because The hospital where they meet is outside the city because the father's boat is in Gloucester, but the mother and her third husband, they live in Winchester. And that is what's so fascinating to me. And New York, I am a country mouse. You know, if somebody said to me, you have a choice between living in a cabin in Montana or living in a townhouse in New York City, I would take the cabin in Montana. I would take I'm not going to see people very often. But all the people that I love, my friends, are here, my work is here, and I'm here a lot, and art is here, and opera is here, and all the things that I love. Symphony Space is here, and I come up for Symphony Space. So it's a wonderful place for me to set a book. I could never write a book that was set in Nashville. I can only know a place just well enough. And I will say that when I started writing this book, the opening was at the Whitney. But then the staircase became really important. And there is not a compelling staircase at the Whitney. Everybody goes up and down on the elevator. And so I was thinking, I actually wrote it, where Eddie Triplett comes out of the elevator. Well, you can't follow somebody on an elevator. You're either in the elevator or you're not in the elevator. And so I thought, okay, scratch the Whitney. They're going to the Met, because then they can go up the staircase. And that was so important to me. And I have a very good friend, Marty Fisher, who was my boots on the ground person. And I was like, okay, go to the Met. I want you to start, go through Armor, and you're going to do this. And they're like, what do you see? What do you see? And you're going to go up to Contemporary. I said, where are they going to stop? What's the piece that they're going to stop in front of in Modern and Contemporary? And this is before I've written the book. But everything is going so well, I don't want to stop and go to New York and do this myself. And Marty, who is the smartest person about New York art I have ever known. She knows every painting in every museum, every exhibit. She goes to an exhibit 5 times if she loves it. And she said, oh, well, they go to Charles Ray. That's the best piece. And they stand in front of Charles Ray. And she said, Charles Ray, I said, what's it called? She said, Ghost Horses. Well, it's not called Ghost Horses. It's called Two Horses. But then I write it the way Becky just read it. It's Ghost Horses.
Ghost Horses, yeah.
And that was all my friend looking at that, who didn't know that I was writing a book in which there is a very small role for a heroic horse. And so I got to start with the horse. It's really beautiful to rely on other people to do your research for you.
Yes.
Yes.
Call me anytime.
I will.
Since we're talking about this, so a related fact, right? So at this point, I feel like we can call this a collaboration, right?
100%.
So this cover is painted by the same artist who painted the cover of Dutch House, which many of you can probably
Noah
picture.
Satterstrom. Yeah.
Yes. I'm sorry.
Noah Satterstrom.
Thank you. And so can you talk a little bit about? And I guess he did. Did he do? Oh no, he didn't do the essays.
No, he did. He did the Dutch House, and he did Whistler.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but can you talk about that process for this time and that relationship and how that works?
Yeah. So Noah is a great friend of mine, and I also want to say that because this is Noah Satterstrom, you're going to have his name. It's on the back. He's an astonishing painter, and he had really gorgeous giclée prints made of the cover of the Dutch House and the cover of Whistler, which are going to be up on his website next week and should sell in 15 minutes. So keep your eye out for that. The most important thing to know about Noah is that he is very busy and he has 3 kids, little kids that need a lot of his time. And so when I called him about the Dutch House, I said, I need a painting of a 12-year-old girl with black hair, blue eyes, and a red coat who is looking directly at the artist. the thing that drives me out of my ever-loving mind as a bookseller and an intelligent reader is that if there is a female person on the cover of a novel, her gaze is averted. She is wearing a hat. She is holding a fan. Her back is to you, and she is looking out the window. And it makes me mad because the reason that this happens is because they want the female reader to be able to imagine herself as the heroine. And they do not believe that we have enough of a leap to be able to see the face of another woman on the cover of a book. And so I said, she must be looking directly at the viewer. And Noah said, okay, black hair, blue eyes, red coat, looking directly at the viewer, got it. And 3 days later, he gave me that painting. And so when I said, okay, can you paint horses? And Noah and I, at this point, are really, really close friends, in part because he has 3 kids, and his only break is to come to my house for breakfast. And so I said, can you paint a horse? And he was like, can I paint a horse? Like, who can't paint a horse? And I said, okay, same thing with the Dutch house. I want the horse to be looking directly at the viewer. And he said, well, their eyes are on the side of their head. So that's kind of a problem. And I was like, make it work. I want a pony. And we had a really hilarious back and forth in which he kept kind of angling the horse, and I was like, I do not want to see the horse's ass. Put it back in the back, you know, and I was like, is that an English saddle? I don't want an English saddle, I want a Western saddle. Put the bridle down, put the reins down, make the mountain smaller. And through all of this, which is also really funny because this is not happening on a computer. This is happening on a canvas. And Noah is so fast and so good that he's just like, yeah, okay, I'll swing that around. All right, that's not a problem. And through all of the iterations, it was daylight with beautiful clouds. And when he was finished with this horse and this scenery, he said to me, what if it was night? And he hasn't read the book. He still hasn't read the book. He doesn't have time to read a book. He'll listen to the audio, but because he's always painting. Oh, and just put a pin in that for 1 second. He and Kate DiCamillo have done a book of fairy tales that are coming out next fall. It is truly the most beautiful book. Adults with kids, adults with no kids, get this book. It is an astonishing collaboration of 2 brilliant artists. But anyway, Noah said, what if it was night? And I said, oh, I really like that idea, but you know, what if you paint it and I don't like night? And he was like, then it'll be day again. Doesn't make any There's night, stars. Oh, night's good.
Perfect.
Night is exactly right.
That's perfect.
So, I mean, it's so satisfying when you're a novelist and you're home alone all the time to have a moment of true artistic collaboration with another person is so thrilling for me and also for my friend. Yeah.
Terrific. Here's a strange technical question, which is that you talked about, you were writing a book at one point about the loss of a friend.
Yeah.
And where you've shared the fact that to write that book, you did it in bed. And I think you had a cookie sheet or something that you put your writing surface
Well, you really did your research, Amor.
Oh, yeah. So I want you to share.
Paying you a lot for this.
Yes. I want you to share with the group your discovery of the treadmill and of its role in your life artistically.
Absolutely. So I have a treadmill desk. I keep waiting for Nordic Track to call me and say, we'd like you to be the spokesmodel for the treadmill desk. The reason that I had a treadmill desk to begin with is because of Susan Orlean. If you ever look at any trend among writers, you can trace all of them back to Susan Orlean, who had every good idea first. Do you know her?
Yes.
She
Yes.
is astonishing. I mean, she is just an amazing person. And she had a treadmill desk ages ago. And if you haven't read her last book, Joyride, knock yourself out and listen to it. Libro FM, I'm just going to plug everything. So you can support your local independent bookseller instead of giving more money to Amazon and Audible. You can. Okay. I know I'm not supposed to say that. So Susan had a treadmill desk, and I got a treadmill desk for my 50th birthday. And I used it to answer emails and to make long phone calls. And when I started Tom Lake, I had all sorts of pain. Margaret Atwood has a wonderful quote that something to the effect of, the only piece of writing advice that is applicable to every writer is your posture. And that is so true, because one's body breaks down. And I had a lot of wrist pain, arm pain, neck pain. And I thought, what if I tried to write fiction on a treadmill desk? And I wrote Tom Lake completely on a treadmill desk. I wrote Whistler completely on a treadmill desk. And what that means is that your pain is, at the end of the day, from the waist down. Your feet hurt. But your arms don't hurt, and your neck doesn't hurt, and your back doesn't hurt. And it's much better to have your feet hurt, because when you stop walking, your feet don't hurt anymore. The most joyful way for me to write is to sit on the couch or in bed like this with a pillow and my notebook computer in my lap and type. That will kill you. My friend Katrina Kennison wrote a book like this, and when she was finished, she had to have a double hip replacement. And so the treadmill desk keeps me physically like the Tin Man oiled. And it is also incredibly good for creativity. And there have been all sorts of studies that say that walking is very inducive to creativity, and it doesn't matter if you're walking in the woods or if you're walking on the treadmill. It's something about that, and I, for me, feel that it is my brain saying, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, instead of what my brain is saying when I'm sitting at my desk, which is flip the laundry, what am I gonna make for dinner? I need to make an appointment for the dog to go to the vet. That boring conversation is replaced by walking, and it's just a really beautiful, creative place. I have such a sense. In the morning, I wake up and I get on that treadmill desk, and I'm going slow, but it's like I am walking into my novel, and I love it.
Do you know how many miles it takes to write the book?
No, and you know what? I should really track
Fascinating,
that.
right?
It would be such
would
a good
totally.
piece of
Yep.
information.
Absolutely.
But people say to me all the time, oh, you know, you can come to Italy and be in this writer's colony. We're going to send you to this beautiful writer's colony on an island and take such good care of you. I'm like, you're not going to ship my treadmill, so I'm not going to go. Okay. Yeah.
All right, so before we turn the lights and take questions from the audience, a quick round here. So Eddie Triplett, the center of the story and the origin of the story, I guess, really. He's a wise figure. So I'm going to share 3 of Eddie's observations about life.
Okay.
And I want you to tell me whether you agree with Eddie or not, and why. Okay? So here's one. There's no such thing as a wrong direction. You don't remember writing that?
I don't remember writing it, and do you have any idea where that was?
Well, I think he's being flip because they're walking. And she's worried about are they going in the right direction? But he makes the comment as there's no such thing as a wrong direction.
Okay, all right.
But I think it's partly in the context of who Eddie is. It's also sort of a reflection on the way he sees life.
So in that context, what he's saying is, I am so happy to be with you. And I would be happy to walk all the way uptown or all the way downtown. There is no such thing as a wrong direction. I mean, to say, he says there's no such thing as a wrong direction, no such thing as a wrong direction, I was like, that's like a Zen koan. And I'm thinking, what does that actually mean? But no, in that context, it means, I love you.
Yeah. So here's one. He says, I don't know why people bother to guess at things. They're always wrong.
Yeah. Yes, because she's always jumping in and saying, wait, is that what happened? Wait, is that what happened? And he's like, just shut up and listen to the story.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Good advice. So last thing, he says, people have no understanding of how love works. They don't take gratitude into account, and they don't think about relief.
Yeah. I think that is wise, and I think that especially as we get older and you've been with the same person for a long time, we need to update our ideas about what love is, because it is about gratitude and it is about relief, and it is that sense of like, I'm so relieved we are leaving this party. I am, oh my God, I am so glad we're together and we're walking out of here. And it's not like, I can't wait to get home so we can jump on one another. It's like, that's not it at all. It's just like, we are leaving this incredibly boring party and I've got your hand and here we go. Oh my God, my husband and I went to a wedding last week, and that was a whole story. But there was a wedding at 4:30, and then there was a reception at the country club. And the wedding was lovely and short, and I don't like the country club. And our house is kind of right in the middle between the wedding and the country club. And as we got in the car, I said, listen, there are going to be a lot of pictures. And then there's going to be a cocktail hour, and we can go home for an hour, and no one's going to know. Everyone's seen us at the wedding, and we're going to make it in time for the dinner. And so we came home, I changed, I put on my shorts, I took the dogs for a long walk, I came back, I put my dress back on, I was like, okay, let's go. We go to the country club, we are there for 10 minutes tops, and they come around and they're like, we're seating for dinner. Score. And we sit down and we have dinner and we have a lovely time, and then we go up because they're going to cut the cake, and we all walk into the other room, and there's the bride and the groom and the cake, and they have one of those pyramids of champagne glasses and the saucers, and everybody's taking a glass, and Carl took my hand and didn't say a word, and just walked, I could cry, like walked me towards the exit. And I could see the room where they were setting up the band, where they were gonna dance until midnight. And I swear to God, I have never loved anyone as much as I loved him. We've been together for like 35 years, and I really could cry just thinking about it. We didn't have to stay for the cake, and we didn't have to dance, and nobody knew we were leaving. And that energy, that love, which, hey, 62, that is my definition of love.
All right, so can we bring up the lights? We have microphones at the base of the two aisles, I believe.
Hi.
Hey, everybody.
Hi,
for
Symphony
coming.
Space people. And maybe you have a question, and maybe you don't.
Yeah, if you don't have a question, I'm going to walk her to the exit. All right, here we go.
Hi.
evening.
I had the great fortune a couple years ago of visiting Parnassus when Kate DiCamillo was there in conversation with you.
Oh boy, that was was that the night that I had COVID?
Yes, it was.
Oh my God. So I was interviewing Kate DiCamillo, my beloved, on stage, and because she was staying with me, and I had COVID, and I'm masked, and at some point I have such a coughing fit, and I said, just do the rest of this yourself. And I left and went into the back room and died. Please, go ahead.
And I was so sad when they said that you had to leave because you weren't feeling well. I'm glad that.
I made it through.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
As a lifelong reader, books like The Tales of Despereaux, because of Winn-Dixie, so special to my heart.
I know.
And nothing made me happier than when my mom was like, we're going to go to the bookstore and you can get a book. I'm sure people ask you all the time, what's your favorite thing about being an author? What's your favorite thing about being a bookseller?
Okay, I'll tell you my favorite thing about owning a bookstore, which is not exactly the same thing. I mean, obviously, as a bookseller, like my whole life I forced my friends and family to read what I wanted them to read. And now I can force everybody. And it is such a joy. And my wonderful publicist, Lindsay Prevett, and I were going around New York today to bookstores to sign stock. And I won't say the name of the book, I took a book away from a woman who was just shopping. I was like, you can do better than this. And she said, she had a copy of Whistler, she had a copy of Maggie O'Farrell's Land, and she had X quantity third copy. I said, are we the same age? And I said, I'm 62. She was like, yeah, I'm 62. And I was like, this is not the book you want. You want John of John by Douglas Stewart. And she said, oh, all right, okay, if that's, great. She will never know what I saved her from. Okay, but my favorite thing about being a bookstore owner is the people that I work with. And I work alone, to have this group of people that I love with everything I am, and we love each other. We have a culture and a community of booksellers in that store. We are at each other's weddings. We are there for each other's children. We are there when one of us comes out to our parents. We are there for all occasions for one another. And I just figure I put every single thing I have into making this a wonderful place to work, making it a job, but also a career that somebody could have for their whole life if they want to stay in the bookstore, and many of those people do, and a belief that that kind of love and community then trickles out into the public that comes into the store, and they feel who we are and how we love each other. And that, I feel, is more of an accomplishment than writing books. And I also feel like what I have done for the humanities as a bookstore owner and as someone who loves to read more than I love to write and loves to recommend books, that is what I am on this earth to do. And so come back to Parnassus and I won't be sick.
It was amazing. It was amazing.
And I'm sure you don't remember me, but
I can barely see you.
my
so
name
no.
is Patchett, and I had the honor of being the nurse practitioner at NYU and was honored to take care of Lucy. And
Oh my God. Wow,
I had a
hi.
background in for 10 years in working with children with cancer, and then for over 30 years with those who underwent reconstructive surgery. And so Lucy and I had a wonderful bond, and I remember meeting you when you came to visit her once, and I just wanted to do a shout out to you because when writing Truth and Beauty, and just the fact that so many of my patients, the reason that they were able to get through some really, really difficult times was because of their friends, and you were her best friend, and I just wanted to do a shout out to you.
This is why we go out in public every now and then. That's amazing, amazing, amazing. You know, people say to me, I'm really good with illness. I am really good with illness. And there's stuff in this book about illness, and people are like, you're such a nice person, you're always there with your friends. I'm terrible with children. And I could spend my life in a hospice, I could spend my life in a dementia unit, I could see everybody out in their final moment. I wouldn't make it 5 minutes in a Montessori. And I always want to say that because people think that I'm so sainted. And I'm like, but that's because I just talk about the things I do well. I don't talk about the things I'm really bad at.
Hi. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited to be here. My question, I hate that I have to follow that, but my question is
It's all right. It's good. It's all good.
My question is about Tom Lake. I feel like in a lot of your fiction and nonfiction, as you pointed out, there's like a lot of conversations about love and intense, complicated familial relationships. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the relationship between Laura and Joe is kind of different from your descriptions of all the other relationships in terms of not how simple it is and not like a lack of passion, but just the emphasis of that book is obviously not on their relationship, but I feel like your characterization of the two of them is really different. So I'm just curious if you could talk more about that choice or anything around that.
Yeah, I mean, if I boiled Tom Lake down to what was the essence for me, it was about the kind of guys we love. Let me just be more specific. The kind of guys I loved in my 20s and the kind of guys I love later. You know, the guy I love later. There was just one of them. And that both of those loves are valid, and that when you are in love with that guy in your 20s that makes you feel like your hair's on fire all the time, that you can't imagine that someday your dream would be to leave a wedding before they cut the cake. Like the hottest thing that could happen to you is that you would get to leave the wedding. And that you can be that same person and both of those things are true. And so Laura and Joe really embody that marriage, the let's leave before they cut the cake marriage. And I've had so many men say to me, thank you for writing nice men, that there aren't enough nice men in literature these days. And I always think, I know such nice men. We actually are not paying him to be here. We are really close friends. And we talk on the phone. We have like a friendship. You're a really nice guy, and you should be well represented in literature. So, I don't know, does that answer the question?
Yeah, that makes sense, thank you.
That'll be my next rut, nice guys. Is that it?
That looks like it.
Yeah, you know
go
what?
ahead.
I yell it and I'll repeat it back. Do I kill my darlings? And that's a Faulkner quote. Yeah, I really do. I really do. And to me, what that means, Kill Your Darlings, is if I write a glorious scene of prose that just jump off the page, the best writing I've ever done, but at the end of the day, I realize it doesn't contribute anything to the well-being of the novel, it doesn't further the reader or the story, I take it out. And I am fierce, and my work in my life, writing magazine pieces and newspaper pieces, I am always looking at how I can be more concise, direct, and clear. I say that as a person who loves Henry James. One of the great early bonds that Jim Fox and I had was over Henry James, and it lasted the course of our friendship. I can really get down with some very difficult, flowery writing, but that is not how I write. One of the reasons why I write picture books effortlessly, which I'm not allowed to say, is because I am so good at knocking words out of sentences and sentences out of paragraphs and just chopping it down and down so that I want people to read. Again, it's not what I necessarily always admire. I like all sorts of different kinds of fiction, but I don't ever want to put in anything that doesn't absolutely have to be there. So yes, Darling's dead.
Ann Patchett, everybody, the great Ann
April
Patchett.
Towles,
Thank you for coming.
everybody.
Thank you for coming.
Symphony Space.